Hi, friends. I'm Joe, and this is Grounded in Fact. I've had a lot of conversations about the state of our country these days, with people from home here in Boston, people on the West Coast, and people everywhere in between. And when I ask folks, hey, how you doing? I'll get a response often filled with sometimes panic, catastrophe, everything's horrible and I don't know what to do. Or sometimes, beside the obvious, I'm doing fine. These responses are typical, and believe me, I get it. That's often my response these days too. But when I'm often in one of our groundwork states in West Virginia or Mississippi, for example, I often get a very different answer. And that distinction is powerful. They'll say, hey, it's Wednesday, and we got to get on with it. At first, I was a little puzzled by the difference. Then someone explained to me that the federal government hasn't been a reliable partner to them for 250 years. They've had oppression, authoritarianism, violence in the backyard for generations. And this is exactly what we're going to do about it. What feels unprecedented and across many neighborhoods in Boston is decidedly less so in places like Birmingham, Alabama, or Tulsa, Oklahoma. They've seen this script before. They've been on the front lines, facing and fighting back against the most regressive and extreme policies and people for decades. So when things feel overwhelming, I remind myself of the conversations just like this one I've had with folks in the Deep South, the Plains, and across Appalachia. These folks are experts at facing extremism and exploitation. When we find ourselves in a moment like this one, where democracy is backsliding and threats to it are never ending, it benefits us most to listen and follow the lead of people who have been fighting against these forces the longest. Too often, we've seen regressive policy incubated in an overlooked state, then it slowly spreads nationally. Suddenly people are like, hey, where did this come from? What's happening? Well, it didn't come from nowhere. You just have to know where to look. My hope with Grounded in Fact is to help call attention to these issues earlier, to give you the facts up front so that we can be in the fight long before the last minute. So that's what we're aiming to do here at Grounded in Fact. We're going to look at some of the most pressing issues facing communities that Groundwork serves. We're going to break them down, we're going to learn a little, we're going to listen to experts, and leave here equipped to push back on those actively trying to do harm. And let's dive right in. So today's topic, data centers. You've seen the headlines, but what actually are they? And why are they all of a sudden all over the place? And why are we building so many of them? What are they for? And who's behind that construction? All excellent questions. So let's get started. First, data centers are facilities used to power technology. As of recently, we're talking about equipment to power AI technology. Nearly 3,000 data centers are either proposed or in progress of being built across the United States. If those are spread out evenly across all 50 states, that would be about 60 data centers per state. Now, if you add that to the already 4,000 plus that are already in operation, that would give us 140 data centers in every state. Tech companies and developers are off behind the push to build as many data centers as fast as they possibly can. They're trying to compress a typical 3-year construction process of building a brand new data center into 1 to 2 years, sometimes as little as 12 months. Part of their plan to meet that accelerated deadline is to keep the building process as secretive as possible. To do this, they have local government officials sign non-disclosure agreements so that they can't talk about their plans to constituents. It makes community input so much harder to achieve, with fewer opportunities to voice oppositions and concerns because people can't even know what is being planned or what's happening in their communities. NDAs also mean we don't know what company is planning to build on which data centers. The sped up process and NDAs shorten environmental review timelines, results in greater destruction of natural resources, local ecosystem, farmlands, and more. More often than not, data centers are built in high environmental burden areas where they'll have the most devastating effects. And get this, it is completely possible to build data centers with 100% newer and clean energy. But oftentimes, these developers are actively choosing to destroy natural resources, our environment, and further exacerbate climate change rather than use renewable energy sources. Back to the 140 data centers that would be in each state if distributed evenly. They're not being distributed evenly. Of course, that's the point. Of the 4,000 plus data centers already in operation, 42% of them are located in the South. Why the South? Well, companies will cite all sorts of reasons, such as lower cost land, lower cost energy, huge state tax incentives. But when you ask locals, you'll hear a different story. Nationally, people of color are 75% more likely to live near polluting sites, resulting in higher risk of cancer, asthma, and more. Industrial air pollution, like the pollution released from data centers, is often more than double in majority Black communities than that of majority white communities. So let's travel to Alabama for a quick example, the state with the fifth highest Black population per capita in the country. Last year, I hosted a live stream conversation with folks from the Alabama Rivers Alliance and the Southern Environmental Law Center about Project Marvel in Bessemer, Alabama. It's now 6 months later, and organizers are still pushing for the plans to be halted. Here's what Charles and Ryan had to say.
The South right now is really being targeted for data center development because we have a lot of water, we have cheap electricity, and a lot of space too. So, we're starting to see these things pop up, not just in Virginia, not just in Georgia, but now also in Alabama. When we have local decision makers that aren't really looking at the big picture and the large impacts of these things, it means that we're citing these facilities in places that aren't necessarily appropriate and in places where, it's going to cause a lot of harm because data centers require resources that are public, like power and water.
Project Marvel is classified as a hyperscale facility, which means it would be one of the largest data centers in the country and truly massive. This singular development would use enough electricity to power over 1 million homes. For comparison, Bessemer, Alabama has a population of about 25,000 residents, which means that Project Marvel would require over 40 times more electricity than required by communities that live there. This would put a tremendous strain on the local power grid, which is happening with all the data centers across the country, resulting in significantly higher electricity bills in the years ahead. Project Marvel, in addition to all that electricity, would also require enough water to fill 3 Olympic swimming pools per day, or the equivalent of an entire aquarium, or nearly 2 million gallons. Can you imagine 2 million jugs of milk? Again, with all the data centers, the amount of water that they use is having a drastic effect on local ecosystems and communities, resulting in entire species of fish going extinct and water scarcity for the people who call these places home. Within 2 years, it's estimated that hyperscale facilities, the biggest of the biggest data centers, will consume 33 billion gallons annually, which is over double of the amount of water that is used today. And by that time, data centers could also account for up to 12% of the entire country's electrical usage. That's more carbon emissions than the entirety of commercial aviation or all of the airlines around the world. And it's not just in Alabama either. Look to Appalachia, where they're calling it the data center rush, with West Virginia being the biggest target. Just last year, they passed sweeping legislation to strip local governments of regulatory authority over such projects. With another hyperscale facility already in the works, this one with the possibility of spanning over 10,000 acres. That's over 500 full-size World Cup soccer fields. And look, if it feels bleak, I know, but hope is not lost. There are people out there actively fighting back against data center construction in places that they call home and doing their darndest to ensure that their natural resources and their communities are protected. With Project Marvel, for instance, because of local organizers, city leaders had to create a revised plan for development with larger residential buffer zones, lower site density, and an updated location. And a revised plan is just the first step. Organizers are rallying their community to continue voicing their concerns as plans move forward. I really hope that you'll take a look at the data centers that are proposed around the areas that you call home. There's a good chance that people are already organizing to get more information, to fight it, to make sure that they got a seat at the table, and if necessary, to stop it. And they've got a better chance at their success if folks do a few simple things in order to take action. Earlier, when we were talking about the experts taking on these fights at their source, this is exactly what I mean. Organizers all over the country are taking the fight against data centers to town halls, to city council meetings, and more. Groundwork Project continues to support these organizers, pushing back on data centers in their communities. Recently, Groundwork's Director of Programs, Anthony Davis Jr., made his way down to Montgomery, Alabama to attend the Alabama Water Rally. He says it better than I can. So let's close out with a clip from his keynote speech where he emphasizes the importance of organizing as a response to data centers.
So in order to run a successful campaign, whether it's to fight a data center or any other issue area in your community has to know that you aren't going to disappear once the campaign ends. I think that's really important. And through our work at Groundwork, we've seen national organizations, as I said, attempt this tactic and fail time and time again. And the reason being that it's extractive and it's transactional. And we never want our community organizing to be extractive of communities or transactional in communities. When we're extracted from a community, we're just as bad as the data centers when we do our organizing that way. And so our neighbors and communities deserve, as I said, year-round engagement and commitment. They deserve organizing that is responsive to their needs and hardships, no matter the season or whether it's an election year. They also deserve to know that once your campaign ends, as I said, they can still expect to run into you at the grocery store, see you at church on Sunday. They'll see you at their kids' Little League game. It's that connective community tissue that allows us to build, but also sustain power. In other words, as organizers, we're living and breathing the fights and struggles alongside our people.
Look, not all data centers are bad, but local communities need to be active partners in their planning and development, not just left in the dark in the race for development dollars. We've seen this playbook before. It's why we do what we do here at Groundwork Project. The South and other often overlooked states and regions are treated as proving grounds for extractive industries and aggressive policies. And then those models are replicated nationwide, and everyone is suddenly asking how it happened. There's power in community. There's even more power in organizing against data centers and any other pressing issue that's happening right now. With each grounded in fact, we'll be sharing a quick resource guide with information on how to take action. Head to the link in the bio to check out Data Center Edition.